Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 full party building guide for Honor Mode. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering a control-based party, so if you want to leave your enemies helpless and completely unable to fight back before you eventually finish them off at your leisure, this is the party for you. This build neutralizes every important threat and counters any that remain, so no matter how difficult the encounter, the enemies will never be able to pose a danger, if they can even act at all. Just as with all of my full party builds, these 4 builds that I'm going to show you are individually very powerful and work even better together. They require no specific story choices for any of the items or events or anything, and of course the items themselves don't overlap between the 4 builds, so no matter how you want to play, this party will be able to handle it. For this build in particular, I'm also emphasizing characters with a lot of strategic choices. So if you want interesting combats where you make a lot of decisions, then this is the party that you're looking for. As always for these videos, I'll be going over each of the characters, how to build them, and how to itemize them, and if you have any more questions about the characters, I'll link the detailed build guides for each of these builds in the description below. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Tarantula for the $10 donation, Wanda Husbando for the £5, Ken Porter for the $20, and Domas Tenzagolskis, Bingle Bongle, and 410 Blazian for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means so much to me. Alright, let's take control. For our first character, we're going to be completely shutting off enemies that rely on attack rolls by reducing their chances to hit to nearly 0. This character is going to use the Radiating Orb debuff to reduce enemy attack rolls to -10, what they would normally be, which means they'll almost never hit. In addition to that, we're going to be stacking the Reverberation debuff on them to knock them prone and reduce their saving throws, and also come with a great suite of control spells as well as supporting spells for our allies to make ourselves even more defensive. If you watched my recent build video on this, you've seen a preview, but there are some significant changes to this character compared to the default way to build it so that it fits in this party, so I'll be going through those as we go through our light cleric as well. Although this is a cleric build, we're going to be starting with a level of druid because we're going to be using the Star Druid's star forms to do even more radiant damage, applying more Radiating Orb debuffs. So we're taking druid as our first level. For our cantrip selection on Druid, we're going to be taking Shillelagh and Thornwhip. These are 2 powerful early game combat cantrips, and one of the great things about this party is how strong we are early. This character is a huge contributor to that because between having good melee attacks and the bonus actions from Star Druid, we can win a lot of early game fights very, very easily. We'll also get guidance for free at level 2, so we don't need to take that at level 1, and we'll still get our 2 copies of guidance for the party. I like to have 2 copies so that each character can react if you want to any skill check, if you want the other character to react in a different way. For example, by casting Bardic Inspiration. For our ability score selection, this is one of the places where this character is going to differ slightly from the previous version of this build, or from the more default and more general version of this build. Because for this party, our initiative gear is going to go on a different character, so we're going to want to take alert on this character, which means we need to reorganize our attributes very slightly. For that reason, we're going to take 17 starting Wisdom, 14 starting Constitution, and 16 starting Dexterity, and then we can put our last 2 points anywhere. I'm usually just going to put them in Strength for a little bit of extra carry weight, though you can put them in Intelligence or Charisma if you prefer. Then we're going to use our odd starting Wisdom and increase that to 18 using either Ethel's Hair or Khalid's Gift, the amulet that boosts your wisdom by 1, depending on what story event you want to do in your playthrough, in order to hit 20 wisdom with only 1 ASI, so we can still fit alert in for this character. So it's a clean way to move our initiative gear, which we used on this build in the other video, to a different character. So that's one major difference. For our skill selection for this character, we're going to take Perception. This is a wisdom-based character that gets Perception, so this is going to handle perception checks. Other than that, it doesn't really matter, so we'll put the last point into Survival just to save you some clicks. Survival isn't required, because even if you fail a survival check, you can still dig in that area and find the chest, but it will save you some clicking around if you just pass the survival check in the first place, and we don't need any of these other skills. That's it for level 1. Let's go to level 2. At level 2 for this character, we're taking our second level of Druid, and we're going to take the Circle of the Stars Druid. This gives us guidance, as well as free casts of Guiding Bolt using these star maps, which is a very useful ability all throughout the game. Being able to cast Guiding Bolt on this character that's themed around doing radiant damage is extremely helpful, because it's just a good source of radiant damage without spending a spell slot. In addition to that, we get our Star Druid Starry Forms, which are going to let us use a bonus action to do even more radiant damage, either with the Archer form for a d8 plus 3 plus our Wisdom at range, or with the Dragon form for an AoE 2d6 plus our Wisdom. Usually you're going to be in Dragon form on this character because you're going to want to be maintaining concentration on spells at all times, and this gives you the basic inability to fail concentration checks. And then also, you're always going to be up close to enemies, so you'll be able to hit a lot of them with Dazzling Breath and debuff a big group of enemies. For our prepared spells for this character, you get Enhanced Sleep and Long Strider, which of course every party wants to have access to these two mobility-based ritual spells that don't take spell slots to use outside of combat, so this character is providing those for the party. We're also going to add in Healing Word and Fog Cloud. These are two very helpful combat spells to have, being able to give you bonus action healing, and no save blinding on enemies, and then a control spell in the form of Entangle, which is very good against melee enemies. So we're already pretty well set up for controlling and damaging enemies, even at low levels. At level 3, we've gotten our Star Druid powers online, so we want to get Spirit Guardians as quickly as we can in order to allow us to apply Radiating Orbs more easily and passively while we just run around. For that reason, we're immediately multi-classing into Cleric, and for our Cleric subclass, we're going to take Light Domain Cleric. This gives us Warding Flare for another defensive option, so this is going to prevent enemies from hitting us. And since they're going to be taking huge penalties on attacks, this reaction will basically force enemies to miss pretty much every attack that they make. It also notably gives us Light for free, which is kind of a nice utility cantrip to get for free. Every party wants access to a real light source, and this is the best way to do it, so just getting it for free is kind of nice on this character as well. And we get to take some Cleric cantrips. So for our Cleric cantrips, we're going to take Sacred Flame to apply radiant damage at range. We're going to take Toll the Dead because before we get our radiant synergies online, Toll the Dead is going to be our best combat cantrip. And there will still be times when we want to just do the most damage possible, so it's pretty nice to have that as well. And then we'll take Resistance. You, again, want at least one copy of Resistance in your party, so this character can provide that also. At time of recording, there is still the bug where Cleric gets 2 extra spells, or 2 extra skill proficiencies when you multi-class into Cleric at later levels. So you can just put these anywhere. It doesn't really matter what you take, but taking Medicine is kind of nice because then this is another Wisdom-based skill that you can have a high bonus to across the whole party. And then for our spell selection here, we're going to go with Command to lock down enemies even more. This, of course, is probably the single best control tool in the game, so obviously in a control-based party, we want access to Command. We'll also pick up Bless to buff our party members, Sanctuary to defend them, and then for our last spell, you have a couple different options here, but having Create Water prepared is never bad, so you can pick that up. Since we already have Healing Word from our Druid levels, or you can move your spells around if you want to change your spell selection slightly. But the most important ones are Command, Bless, and Sanctuary to give you yet more defensive and offensive options. Level 4, we're taking our second level of Cleric, getting Radiance of the Dawn, which lets us again do a big AoE radiant damage burst for even more debuffing. And at level 5, we get our third level of Cleric. The important spells that we get at Cleric level 3 are, of course, Hold Person, yet more lockdown for the party, Aid to help defend the party, and Spiritual Weapon, which can distract enemies. And given that we're applying all of these attack penalties, they will often attack the Spiritual Weapon and not be able to hit it at all. So it can just buy you extra turns of the enemy doing nothing. Warding Bond is also very good for this party. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. But basically, if you Warding Bond your other melee character, up front, then that is some pretty strong synergy that can divide the damage between you if enemies do ever get to do meaningful damage. At Cleric level 4, we get our first feat, and we already talked about boosting our wisdom using Khalid's Gift or Ethel's Hair, so our feat here is going to be Alert. This way we don't have to use too much initiative gear on this character, and we'll still always go before enemies so we can lock them down immediately. We also get an additional cantrip, and you can take Blade Ward to help protect yourself, or Bursting Sinew if you just want to have fun exploding corpses. Blade Ward will sometimes come up, so it's what I'm going to take here, but it doesn't come up so often that you can't just have a good time by blowing up some dead bodies. At Cleric level 5, we get access to Spirit Guardians, which of course will let us apply radiant damage and radiating orbs just by passively running around the battlefield. This character is amazing at concentrating on spells, thanks to Dragon Form, so we'll never drop concentration on this, and it's going to apply a ton of debuffs just as we move around. We also get Fireball, which is not an irrelevant spell to have. It's non-concentration, so if you just need to fry a bunch of small enemies, that's a great go-to. For prepared spells at this level, the important ones that we're adding are, of course, Spirit Guardians. And we'll also add Glyph of Warding because this is yet another AoE control effect if we want it, and gives us versatile damage types for fights where we need that. Cast Glyph of Warding under an enemy, it blows up right away, so you can use any of the glyph types. At character level 8, this is where we're going to make a slight deviation, again, from the more generic version of the build. Since this party doesn't normally get access to spike growth, and this is still an extremely powerful and relevant spell, even this late, we're going to take our 3rd level of Druid. We'll still hit all our important cleric spells, but there's a lot of fights in like late Act 2 and early Act 3 where spike growth is still the best thing that you can do. So taking one more level of Druid doesn't slow down our spellcasting progression by that much, and gets us access to yet another pretty important tool for the party. We also get Moonbeam, and Moonbeam Sanctuary is still a broken combo, so there's some fights that your character can solo just doing that. Though be aware that Moonbeam won't apply most of the radiant damage debuffs that you have, because the damage doesn't count as coming from the actual character. It comes from a hidden summon that creates the Moonbeam. Then at level 9, it's back to Cleric, giving us improved Warding Flare, which combined again with all our control effects and all the debuffs that we're putting on enemies will let us make our allies basically unhittable by applying our Warding Flare to enemy attacks against everyone in our party. At level 10, we get Cleric level 7, giving us 4th level spell access, and there's a couple pretty nice spells that we get here as well. Guardian of Faith and Wall of Fire are both great spells just to have access to. You can block doorways with Guardian of Faith. Enemies will have so many penalties that they won't be able to damage it, so it will almost always do the full 60 damage on the Guardian of Faith. More if you cast Aid to increase its health. And Wall of Fire just solos a bunch of encounters, so getting that as a spell that you always have access to is pretty nice. Normally, I would prepare Banishment, but since this party has easy access to Banishment elsewhere, we don't need Banishment, so the only major spell that we get to prepare from our 4th level spells are the ones that we come with, and Freedom of Movement, which is a great defensive tool to snap an ally out of a stun if they happen to get stunned. So that's going to be the most important spell that we get at this level. Then at Cleric level 8, we get Potent Spellcasting, which actually is quite relevant for this character. Our cantrips are really good because they apply a lot of debuffs, so just doing a little bit more damage with our cantrips is actually really nice for this character. And of course, we also get to increase our wisdom up to 20, and remember, we're adding the extra 1 from either the item or Ethel's Hair in order to hit 20 wisdom with just this 1 ASI. Finally, at character level 12, we're taking our 9th level of Cleric, which mostly is for Destructive Wave. This is going to be the best thing that we can do when in addition to our Spirit Guardians. So usually for this character, we're going to be using a 6th level spell slot on Spirit Guardians, if we have one available, or our highest level remaining spell slot if we don't, Destructive Wave to take out a bunch of small enemies and knock everything prone, and then usually you're going to use a 4th level spell slot on Aid to cast it across your whole party in order to boost your party's hit points. So that's kind of the spell slot management for the character. Your highest level spells go to Destructive Wave and Spirit Guardians, and then your 4th level spell goes to Aid, and then more copies of Spirit Guardians in fights where you don't need the highest level spell slot. Then you use your lower level ones for utility. Of course, we need to talk about this character's items, though, so let's talk about those. 4 items for this character. This character's items are fairly set. There's room for some variation, but mostly you're going to want the same items because this character is built around a specific set of items that are available in the game and using them to the greatest possible extent. That item set is the Radiating Orb and Reverberation combo of items. So I'm talking specifically about the Luminous Armor, the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, the Boots of Stormy Clamor, the Callous Glow Ring, and the Coruscation Ring. This will allow you to apply Radiating Orb, which reduces enemy attack rolls anytime you deal spell damage and anytime you deal radiant damage. Since this character does a ton of radiant damage and a ton of spell damage passively by running around with Spirit Guardians up, you're going to be applying these Radiating Orbs constantly. So almost every fight, enemies will have a -10 to all their attack rolls, and disadvantage thanks to Warding Flare. So this combo of items, the Coruscation Ring applies Radiating Orb whenever you deal spell damage while you're illuminated, and since you have light as a cantrip, you can always be illuminated. The Callous Glow Ring does an extra 2 points of radiant damage. It's not shown in the tooltip, but this is radiant damage on all of your damage sources, so it's going to work with all of our effects that care about doing radiant damage. Such as the Luminous Armor. Whenever you deal radiant damage, you apply Radiating Orb in a 10-foot radius around you. And then, as you're applying those, you also apply Reverberation, which stacks saving throw penalties on enemies up to 5, and then when they hit 5, they have to make a save, take some damage, and if they fail the save, they become prone. So all your enemies that are near you are going to be stacking both of these debuffs constantly, and you can stack them both to maximum in one turn with character, and they'll take a bunch of damage, get knocked prone, and even if they are able to act, they'll have a -10 penalty on their attacks. So any enemy that relies on attack rolls is just going to be debuffed to the point where they can't do anything. So these boots, gloves, and armor are always going to be used by this character. In addition to that, we're going to use Khalid's Gift in order to hit 20 Wisdom. If you're using Ethel's Hair instead, you can go for a different amulet. The Spine Shudder amulet is pretty good for even more reverberation on this character. Or you can use, I put it on the other character, and you can use the, you can use the Amulet of Greater Health here, which will give you extra constitution and make you even harder to kill. So the Spine Shudder amulet or the Amulet of Greater Health if you're using Ethel's Hair, Khalid's Gift if you're not. You also, because we have Alert, don't need the initiative gear, so we're just going to go with save DC and defensive gear for the rest of this character's items. For our helmet, the Hood of the Weave is going to be the best in slot, but anything that increases your spell save DC is going to be the most important thing for this character. And for our cloak, we're going to go with a defensive cloak. Our other spellcaster is going to use the Cloak of the Weave. And this character, enemies having disadvantage on attacking you is great because they have such high penalties that they're always going to miss their attacks at disadvantage. And it removes critical hits as something that you're worried about. We're also going to use Ketheric's Shield for more spell save DC. Another option here is also the Adamantine Shield to prevent critical hits, but I don't think it's necessary because enemies will always have disadvantage attacking you, so we're going to go for the more offensive shield. And then for our bow, it doesn't really matter what you have for the bow, but I like the Darkfire short bow just for some damage resistances, since we're putting the Hellrider longbow on a different character. A couple other items that are worth mentioning for the early game. Nature's Snare is a really good staff in the early game for this character. We're doing a lot of spell damage, and we'll often be doing, we're doing a lot of melee attacks in the early game with Shillelagh, so we'll often be ensnaring enemies with Nature's Snare. The Spell Sparkler can let you build up even more charges as you do a bunch of spell damage with this character. And of course, the Staff of Arcane Blessing is really good since we have multiple spell attackers in the party. You can buff your whole party up even further with the Staff of Arcane Blessing. But usually the items that I have equipped here are the ones that you're going to want. For our weapon in the endgame, the Blood of Lathander remains relevant throughout the entire game. This character is also a great carrier for Selune's Spear of Night, being able to use Moonbeam and the Moonmote ability. So if you do take the story route that gets you Selune's Spear of Night, then this is a great carrier for that. So either of the two sort of like glowy, light side aligned legendary weapons are pretty nice for this character. You can never go wrong with the Blood of Lathander because the cast of Sunbeam, again, will do radiant damage and it sheds light automatically, so you don't have to have light up. And the once per long rest, coming back from having your hit points reduced to 0, will rarely happen for this character, but it's a nice panic button when it does happen. Finally, the last thing worth mentioning for this character is that in the early game, the buff on heal items are pretty good for you. You can stay in Chalice form and use the Whispering Promise, Hellrider's Pride, and Hellrider's Pride in order to apply Blade Ward and Bless to all of your allies before you get the Boots of Stormy Clamor and the Gloves of Belligerent Sky, or all the rings and the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, which you'll then replace these items with. But this character's itemization is fairly set. You're going to go for all the debuffing items that make the character function. With our second character, we're going to finish the job that our first character started and completely shut down melee enemies entirely. Between these two characters, melee enemies will spend so much of their time disarmed, disabled, and debuffed that they simply won't be a threat to your party at all. This character and our cleric make an unstoppable wall of a front line that enemies simply won't be able to get past, and both output great damage and synergize extremely well. I'm talking, of course, about the Glaivemaster Fighter. This character works very well because with our cleric and with our other party members, because not only does it provide a ton of control and lockdown, it also outputs great consistent damage, which we do need to eventually kill enemies. And because it's a Sentinel-based character, it's going to keep enemies locked inside of our AoE control spells and our Spirit Guardians that our cleric is outputting, so they won't be able to escape all of the damaging effects that they're suffering from. It also is going to get constant free attacks because of Sentinel and won't be taking any hits in return thanks to its inherent lockdown and all the debuffs on enemies. So all of these effects synergize to make a frontline that enemies just won't be able to get through. For our first level with this character, we're going to be taking a level of Rogue. This is because we can get expertise in Sleight of Hand and have a character that's great at lockpicking right away. We're going to want Rogue levels anyways, so this character having the skill access for our party is going to be very important. You should always have a character that's good at picking locks, and this character is one of the best out there. For our ability score selection here, we're going to be taking 16 in Dexterity, 16 in Constitution, and then a slightly unusual split for a fighter, where we're taking 14 points in Charisma. This will make our swashbuckler abilities land a little bit more frequently. This character will also be using one attribute item in the late game. In the early game, you can just use this stat spread alongside one of the finesse longswords or one of the other finesse weapons that you have access to early game. But later on in the game, you're going to want to use one attribute item because this character is very feats starved. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but you're either going to be using the Gloves of Dexterity, the Gloves of Giant Strength, or an Elixir of Hill Giant Strength in order to bump your stats up to the highest possible values. For our skill selection here, we are going to be taking Sleight of Hand Expertise. This is the most important thing and gives our party an excellent lock picker. And we're also going to be taking at least proficiency in acrobatics. This character can easily get pushed around otherwise, thanks to our low strength and being in melee, so acrobatics proficiency is very important. In addition to that, I like having expertise in stealth. It just gives the character an alternate way to play, and this party can have multiple pretty strong stealth characters in it, so that's another dimension that you can have for encounters where it's good to roll stealth. And then finally, with our last point, I usually just put this in perception. Even though this isn't a super high perception bonus, having your character that's disarming traps and picking locks have a bonus to perception can help avoid accidentally wandering into a trap without noticing it. That's all the decisions we have to make at level 1. Let's go to level 2. At level 2, we're immediately multi-classing, and we're going to take a level of fighter so that we can get our combat potential online as quickly as possible. For our fighting style, we're going to be taking defense fighting style. You can also take great weapon fighting, but I like defense a lot on this character because it gives you a very strong synergy. It's also always just good in general, but high AC is particularly good in this party because we're putting so many attack penalties on enemies. High AC characters will be almost impossible to hit. And you usually want the enemy to target your allies so that you can strike back at them with Sentinel. So this is not only going to give us just more defensive capabilities, it's also going to enhance our offense by making it more likely that we get free attacks. So defense fighting style is very good. At character level 3, we're taking our second level of fighter, which of course gives us action surge, which is even more early game damage. And then at character level 4, with our third level of fighter, we get our fighter subclass. The subclass that we're going to take here is Battlemaster Fighter, which is going to give us even more lockdown and control because Battlemaster maneuvers will let us take enemies out of the fight pretty easily. For our maneuvers, we're going to be taking Precision Attack. It's very important to get Precision Attack on a Battlemaster Fighter. Hitting your attacks is the most important thing that you can do in the game, so the bonus to attack rolls is almost always correct to pick. Our second two are a little more variable, so I encourage you to play around with this, but the ones that I recommend are Trip Attack. Trip Attack is probably the best control effect here. Disarming is also very good, but this gives you advantage on your attack rolls, lets you take out enemies, break their concentration on spellcasters, and a lot more besides. And then Riposte. Riposte gives you yet another way to attack on the enemy turn, and enemies now have no good options. If they attack you, they'll almost certainly miss, and then you riposte them, hitting them. If they attack your allies, you hit them because of Sentinel. So you're always going to get a free attack on the enemy turn with this character. At character level 4, we actually have a choice here, and this is going to depend on exactly how you've set up the character. If you're using strength elixirs and using the early game strength-based polearms, before we get the Dancing Breeze, the finesse polearm, again, more on this in the item section, then I recommend taking Sentinel and Polearm Master as quickly as possible. If you're using the finesse longswords and not using attribute items until the late game, then just taking Great Weapon Master for more damage is going to be the best way to handle it. I'm going to go ahead and suggest taking Sentinel right away. You get your full synergies online, and I think that using the strength elixirs in the early game is generally the stronger way to build the character, so that's the assumption that I'm going to make, but there are some options in terms of how you construct this character. So at this level, it's either going to be Sentinel, in order to just make more attacks and lock down enemies even more, or Great Weapon Master, depending on which of those routes you're going with your attribute item. Basically, if you're using Strength Elixirs, take Sentinel. If you're not using Strength Elixirs, stick with Great Weapon Master for more damage. At fighter level 5, of course, we get extra attack, and then at fighter level 6, which obviously is way more damage, and then at fighter level 6, we get an additional feat. The other feat that we're going to take here, again, is going to depend on whether you're using strength elixirs. If you're using strength elixirs, we'll take Polearm Master right away in order to get this very powerful combo online immediately. If you aren't, then you'll take Sentinel, having taken Great Weapon Master previously. So here we're going to take Polearm Master under the assumption that you are using the Strength Elixirs. This way, when an enemy comes into range, you get to make an opportunity attack against them with Polearm Master. Because this is a long-ranged weapon, they won't be in their own melee range, and Sentinel will stop them from moving when you hit them with that opportunity attack, which will prevent them from attacking at all. It will also, if they try to leave the area, you can opportunity attack them and prevent them from moving, and they'll stay stuck inside of the of your allies' Spirit Guardians, which conveniently is now online as a full combo because you're level 7. So the two characters have hit this major power spike where enemies are locked inside of the Spirit Guardians, basically permanently. Having gotten that combo online, we're now going to go back to Rogue in order to get even more control and lockdown abilities. At level 2 of Rogue, of course, we get Cunning Action, Hide, Dash, and Disengage. These are very nice abilities that will let us position this character more easily. This party is very mobile, thanks to having all of the mobility rituals and other mobility tools, and this character being able to keep up with your Cleric, who's speeding around the battlefield, debuffing things with Spirit Guardians, is very important. So this is very, very helpful. And Cunning Action, Disengage also has a cool item synergy that I'll talk about in that section as well. At Rogue level 3, we get to take our Rogue subclass, and the subclass that we're going to take is Swashbuckler Rogue. Swashbuckler Rogue does require you to be using a finesse weapon in order to use its maneuvers at level 4, but we will be able to get the Dancing Breeze, a weapon that is both finesse and a glaive, so it'll work for both Polearm Master and Swashbuckler. At level 3, we don't yet have those abilities, but we do get Fancy Footwork, which prevents opportunity attacks against us anytime we hit an enemy, so we can reposition the character even without taking attacks. That won't matter, because enemy attacks will never hit against this party. They'll be too debuffed, but can still be nice. But more importantly, we get Rakish Audacity, increasing our initiative. Boosting our initiative even higher is very important for this character. One goal, of course, of this party is to have everybody go before the enemy does, so that they can't ever fight back because they're too locked down. So the +2 initiative that you get from Swashbuckler is great for that. Then at character level 10, we get our Swashbuckler abilities online, and these include Flick of the Wrist, Vicious Mockery, and Sand Toss. Now, Flick of the Wrist can only be used if you have a finesse weapon equipped, which is why we need the Dancing Breeze glaive to be both a polearm and a finesse weapon, but will allow you to disarm enemies, and of course is extremely powerful as a result, giving us yet another way to shut down melee enemies completely. We also get Vicious Mockery, which is an okay ranged bonus action. You're usually not going to cast this on this character, though. You have better things to do with your bonus actions, like make Polearm Master attacks or just jump. And then Sand Toss, of course, can blind the enemy. Now, the con save for this is based on your Charisma, so enemies will often pass the saving throw, but blind is a pretty powerful debuff, so even a small chance of blinding can be very powerful, especially against enemies that actually have to make a lot of attack rolls. For our feat here, we're going to go back and take Great Weapon Master. This character's damage does get a little bit weaker in the late game without Great Weapon Master, but now we have so much accuracy, and we should be able to do so much damage, and we're always going to be using a two-handed weapon at this point, that Great Weapon Master just lets you power up your damage significantly. The +10, even this late in the game, is still a lot of additional damage. Savage Attacker is also a totally reasonable alternative to Great Weapon Master. Usually Great Weapon Master will be more average damage, but if you put a lot of bonus damage dice items on this character, then Savage Attacker can work as well. So either of these two options can be pretty good. Then at character level 11, we're going back to Fighter, which gets us 2 more Battlemaster maneuvers. And the maneuvers that we're going to take are Pushing Attack, still very useful at this point in the game, and Menacing Attack. This is just yet more ways to debuff enemies and control them. Menacing Attack, frightening an enemy, can be very helpful, again, shutting down melee enemies even further. And Pushing Attack works very well against enemy like mages and stuff. You can just punt them off of a cliff, and then you don't have to deal with them. And then finally, at character level 12, we're taking our 8th level of Fighter, and we're taking a feat. And the feat that we're going to take is Alert. This boosts us up to +10 initiative, so even in the most difficult encounters, we're always going to go before the enemies. You can swap out Alert for something else if you want to, if you're using one of the gloves and not using strength elixirs. You can use vigilance elixirs for the encounters where you need high initiative. And then you can fit in both Savage Attacker and Great Weapon Master for more damage, or Mobile for more movement speed, but Alert is usually going to be a great default, so that's what we're going to select for this build. In contrast to our first character, whose items were fairly set in stone, this character's items are very open for customization, so this is where you're going to get to play around with some of the fun items that you really want to include in your party. There are a couple things that we need in particular. So first off, I mentioned the Dancing Breeze. This is always going to be our endgame weapon because it is both finesse, allowing us to use our swashbuckler abilities, and a glaive, so it's a polearm, so it works with Polearm Master. Up until that point, we have a couple directions that we can go for our weapons. If you're using elixirs of Hill Giant Strength all throughout the first act, then you can use any polearm and take Polearm Master and Sentinel earlier, like I mentioned. The Unseen Menace is usually a very good bet. This gives you advantage on all of your attacks. And then later the Halberd of Vigilance, because of course this is overall the strongest polearm in the game, up until the Act 3. If you are not using those, so if you intend to use the Gloves of Dexterity or the Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength, ignore the name here, it's an artifact of having spawned the item in this save, then in the early game, you won't be able to use a polearm because you won't have a finesse polearm yet, so you can use and you won't have high strength. So you can use one of the finesse longswords in order to still have Great Weapon Master and attack using your dexterity. These two are Lorethian's Wrath, which is overall the more damaging option for this character, or Falar Alluve, which can buff your allies with the Shriek ability to increase your damage significantly. This character makes an excellent Falar Alluve carrier up until Act 3, so that can help increase your party's damage output enormously in the early game. So you're either going to be using a Strength Elixir and one of these polearms, or you're going to be using one of the Finesse Longswords. In the late game, of course, you're either still going to be using Strength Elixirs, you'll have switched to Cloud Giant Strength, or you'll be using either the Gloves of Dexterity or Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength in order to hit high strength totals, or high attribute totals, in order to actually land your attacks. Overall, I think the most powerful way is just to use the Strength Elixirs, but there are some other options for Elixirs, like Bloodlust or Vigilance, if you want to use one of these items, and you don't have to remember to use a Strength Elixir every day. If you're not using one of these gloves, there are some other really good glove options. In the early game, the Gloves of the Automaton will again give you advantage on a lot of your attacks, which is very helpful. And then in the later game, the Gauntlets of the War Master are great for this character. Giving enemies disadvantage on the saves against your maneuvers and your weapon actions means that you are very frequently going to be able to land your Battlemaster maneuvers, causing enemies to fail their saves against all of your control effects and locking them down even further. In addition to that, of course, we want a decent set of medium armor. So in the late game, this is going to be the Armor of Agility, which is just the overall best set of medium armor for most characters, and for this character with its high dexterity works very well. It's going to give you very solid armor class and increase your saving throws. Up until that point, something like the Adamantine Scale Mail can work very well. Even though this doesn't let you use your full dexterity for armor class, it prevents crits and will make you very tanky in the early game, alongside all of your other bonuses. In addition to those items, this character benefits from anything that increases its damage and anything that increases its defense. So I like to put other AC and saving throw items on this character, like the Ring of Protection, or the Evasive Shoes in order to increase our defensive capabilities. The Helm of Baldur is really nice for you, giving you bonuses to a bunch of relevant stats, and preventing you from getting stunned, one of the few ways you can actually be affected by enemies at all, so the Helm of Baldur is really great there. Finally, one fun item I wanted to mention for this character is the Cloak of Cunning Broom. You can disengage as a bonus action as a rogue, and being able to create a fog cloud just as a bonus action to no-save blind enemies that you were previously next to is really cool. And because you have Sentinel, you can often keep them locked inside the fog cloud, even though it's a very small radius, by preventing them from moving, so they can stay blinded for multiple turns. So this is just a really fun item that I've really enjoyed using on this character, but I highly encourage you to use this character to play around with cool items. Because your itemization is so open, this is where you get to really experiment in your run. For our third character, we want to get as many control spells as possible available for our control party, as well, of course, as utility and damaging spells. And what better character to do it with than one that gets access to basically every good spell in the game, the Omnicaster. This character will also be an incredible party face, so it'll cover all of our out-of-combat skill checks other than lockpicking, and give us access to every spell that we don't have from our cleric. Including ones from Wizard and Warlock spell lists as well, so we'll just have every important spell available. For this character, we're going to be starting with a level of Bard, and that way we can get our skills online immediately. For our Bard cantrips, we're going to be taking Friends, which makes us even better in dialogue, of course. You can just leave the area after casting this on Honor Mode, and enemies won't aggro if you're not there when the Friends time's out. And we'll take Minor Illusion, because every party should have access to Minor Illusion. This character gets to have that, and provides that to our party. For our spell selection here, we're going to be taking Dissonant Whispers. This is the best early game combat spell for bards. We'll pick up Disguise Self. Really nice to have this utility again if you're acting as the party face, so Disguise Self is just really good overall. We'll also take Sleep, because for the early game, this is the strongest combat spell in the game, and then later on we're going to swap it out as it loses relevance at higher levels. And then finally we'll take Healing Word. Always nice to have this on a second character as well, so that they can stabilize each other if necessary. For our ability score selection, we're going to be going with an odd number again, but for a different reason this time. We'll be taking 16 Dexterity, 14 Constitution, 10 in Wisdom, and 17 Charisma. And then we'll even out this odd number in Charisma using the Actor feat, which will also get us expertise in Performance and Deception, so that we end up with expertise in every dialogue skill, making this character the ultimate party face, in addition to providing incredible combat power. We can do this because we're dedicating all our initiative gear to this party member, so we don't need to take alert on this character, and we'll still be able to win initiative. For our skill selection, therefore, we're going to take Persuasion, and we're going to take Intimidation. Deception and Performance you'll get for free from the Actor feat, so you don't actually need to spend skills known on these. You can also take Deception if you want it for the early game and then respec later, but Actor will give you skill proficiency there for free. In addition to that, we can put our proficiency in acrobatics so that we don't get shoved around, and then you can put it into any of the intelligence skills that you want to be good at. Typically, religion is the most important of these, and so you can get okay bonuses here. We'll also have decent intelligence later on, plus Jack of all trades from Bard, so we should be okay at making these skill checks in dialogue, even if we don't put proficiency in them. Our last skill proficiency doesn't matter that much, but getting higher religion will help us with some endgame skill checks. Other than that, we don't have to make any decisions as a level 1 bard, except of course we have to choose the right starting instrument or you're going to ruin your entire playthrough, so make sure you don't get that wrong. And then let's go on to level 2. At character level 2, this character is going to immediately multi-class, and we're going to take a level of Cleric, because this character is going to be providing some healing in the early game as a life cleric. And this also gives us armor proficiency and access to even more powerful spells. Although we already have a cleric in the party starting at level 3, this gives us cleric abilities starting at level 2, so we get some very important cantrips. We're going to get guidance, so we have a second copy of guidance available, and we get thaumaturgy, making us even better as a party face. In addition to that, we also get blade ward, which is pretty nice for this character to help defend itself. So all of these utility cantrips are very nice. Our spells from Cleric can... we only get one spell prepared at this level, but we're going to go with Sanctuary, because a second copy of Sanctuary means that our characters can each Sanctuary if necessary, keeping our party alive very easily. We also do get 2 more skill proficiencies thanks to the bug, so again, you can put these into medicine and history and just have slightly better skill proficiencies. But really, we're here for the utility cantrips and access to all of the heavy armor and everything that you get from being a cleric, and the bonus to healing, which this character is very good at providing healing, and will make a great user for the buff on healing items as we trade them off of our Star Druid and other cleric on into the late game. Character level 3, we're going to be multi-classing yet again on this character and taking a level of Wizard. Wizard, of course, can scribe any scroll that you have, and it's based on your total caster level, not your total wizard level. So with 3 caster levels, we have access to 2nd level wizard spells. While we only have 8 intelligence right now, we're going to be using the Warped Headband of Intellect to replace our intelligence with 17, and that'll be this character's helmet for the entire game, so we will quickly be able to have decent wizard casting in addition to our excellent bardic casting. For our wizard cantrips, we're going to take all 3 of the major combat cantrips. We'll take Firebolt, Ray of Frost, and Bone Chill, and that way we have a great array of possibilities for our combat attacks. Up until this point, we've just been using crossbows with our high dexterity. And then for our wizard spell selection, this is going to depend somewhat on what scrolls you've found up until this point. The most important one to take here, or the 2 important ones to take, are Find Familiar and Shield, which you can't find scrolls of. So all of these others you can learn from scrolls, or all the other most important ones you can learn from scrolls. But Find Familiar and Shield you need to actually learn as you level up. So we're going to take those with our first level of Wizard, giving us the best spell access. We only get 1 prepared spell at this level. It's usually going to be Shield, but later levels we'll get more. Once we get the Warped Headband of Intellect, we'll get more prepared wizard spells, and we'll be able to prepare an array of powerful wizard spells depending on exactly which scrolls we've found and what we've scribed. At level 4, we're going back to Bard, because of course we want to keep improving our Bard levels. We get Jack of all trades, making us even better at out-of-combat skills, and Song of Rest, which makes our whole party more durable and gives us more longevity. For our spell at this level, we're going to take Tasha's Hideous Laughter, and we're also going to replace Sleep with something else. At this point, you should have a good sense of what your party really needs. So you can take something like Thunderwave to protect yourself. You can take Featherfall. You can take Speak with Animals if you don't want to use the Speak with Animals potions. I'm going to recommend just grabbing Thunderwave so that you can push enemies away if they do happen to get your front line towards you. Get past your front line to you. At character level 5, we're taking our 3rd level of Bard, and of course we get to take our Bardic subclass, which is going to be Lore Bard. This works extremely well with all of our control spells and controlling effects, because Cutting Words can both reduce enemy attack rolls and reduce enemy saving throws. So you can make enemies fail saves against your powerful control spells, or cause them to miss. In addition to the attack penalties and disadvantage effect that you have, enemies will never land attacks on this party, and any enemies that rely on casting spells or using abilities, you'll be able to force them to fail a save against some debilitating spell effect, so you can use Lore Bard to lock those down as well. For our spell selection at level 2, we already have Cloud of Daggers from our wizard spells, so I'm going to recommend taking Enhance Ability, because Cloud of Daggers is the most important combat spell, but you can get that from wizard. Also, at this point, we're a 5th level spellcaster, so we'll have access to 3rd level wizard spells, including, again, some of the better control spells in the game from scrolls. Enhance Ability gives us a nice utility spell that we can use in order to pass important skill checks even more. We also get expertise in 2 skills here. So we're going to take expertise in persuasion and intimidation, and then we'll learn expertise in performance and deception later on. And we get to learn 3 new skills, so we can go ahead and learn all of the intelligence skills if we want to. We can have another character be good at perception or good at survival. You can take animal handling, though there aren't a lot of animal handling checks in this game. But mostly just learning all of the knowledge skills is going to give you even more ability to pass dialogue checks. With this character, with the bug from Cleric and with the Guild Artisan background as your starting background, you get expertise in every dialogue skill, proficiency in every intelligence skill, as well as insight and medicine, which are basically all the skills that are ever rolled in dialogue, so you're always going to be able to pass skill checks. Character level 6, we get an additional cantrip here, and so we're going to take Vicious Mockery. Just nice to have Vicious Mockery. You can also pick up Mage Hand, because it's good utility even this late in the game. But Vicious Mockery is another okay cantrip that can add yet another element of control, so we're going to add that in. Usually you'll use your wizard cantrips, but Vicious Mockery comes up sometimes. We'll also take Heat Metal. This is a spell that not a lot of characters get access to, but again is even more disadvantage and disarm, so yet more control available. And for our feat, I already mentioned that we're going to take Actor, which gives us both proficiency and expertise in deception and performance, so now we have expertise in every dialogue skill. At Bard level 5, we get Font of Inspiration, so we can use cutting words even more frequently, and we also get we also get 3rd level Bard spells. Here we can learn Plant Growth. We've already learned Hypnotic Pattern as a scroll from our wizard spellcasting, so we can use that with our wizard spells as well. So we don't need Hypnotic Pattern. But Plant Growth is another control spell that this party can have. It's non-concentration, so it's always going to be extremely relevant. We can also replace one of our lower level spells, usually Thunder Wave, which we no longer really need, with Glyph of Warding for yet another copy of a damaging and controlling spell. This is just an extremely versatile spell, so having 2 characters capable of casting it is very, very nice. Then at character level 8, Bard level 6, because we're a lore bard, we get to choose 2 spells from Magical Secrets. Now, this is where we get Counterspell, and I will say one thing about this party that is a little unfortunate is that we don't get Counterspell until level 8. You don't usually need Counterspell before level 8 because this is where enemy spellcasters get really dangerous, but this is one of the few weaknesses of this party, is that this is your first access to Counterspell, is getting it as a multi-class lore bard, so it's somewhat delayed. That's the major downside of this party. Other than that, there really aren't any. In addition to Counterspell, we're also going to take Hunger of Hadar, again, one of the best control spells in the game, not normally available to these classes, but because we're a lore bard, we get to dip out into other classes and take control spells from other areas. For our spell selection from Bard, you can just grab any utility spell that you're casting really frequently, but Hypnotic Pattern is still always good, even though we know it as a wizard, same with Hold Person, or you can grab a spell that you don't normally get, like Lesser Restoration, in order to just have more access to a wide variety of spells, things like things that you can't find as a scroll. At character level 9, we're taking our 7th level of Bard, and we get a 4th level Bard spell. There aren't that many Bard spells we're super excited by, but I'm going to take Freedom of Movement here. This gives us yet another copy of Freedom of Movement, so even if one of our Freedom of Movement casters gets stunned, the other can snap them out of it. So you always have a backup for your backups, which just makes this party incredibly hard to take down. Then at Bard level 8, we get yet another spell, and again, at this point, it's going to depend on what spells you've found wizard scrolls for, but you'll probably be casting Confusion pretty frequently, so knowing this is a Bard spell can be very useful, and then you can prepare a different spell with your wizard spell levels. Same with Cloud of Daggers, it's all a very similar principle. And then for our feat, we're going to take an ability score improvement to bump our charisma up to 20. We'll still be playing with 17 intelligence, so our bard spellcasting will be a little stronger than our wizard spellcasting, but because we're stacking all of our save DC items on this character, our save DCs on both types of spellcasting will be more than high enough that enemies will usually fail. Then at level 11, we're taking Bard level 9, and we get a 5th level spell here. Here we're just going to grab Hold Monster to keep locking down enemies. Again, this is available as a scroll for wizards, but Hold Monster is another one of the best control spells in the game, so increasing its DC and always having it available is great. And then finally, at Bard level 10, we get our 2nd copy of Magical Secrets and just a bunch of other stuff from Lore Bard. So firstly, we get a cantrip, and we're going to take True Strike to annoy people in the comments below. And then for our spell selection here, you can, again, just go back and take any utility spell or any spell that you're casting really frequently that you feel like you need. Fear is a good option. Cloud of Daggers is a great option. Greater Invisibility is a good option if you're using that, or Standard Invisibility, Hold Person. Any of those that you find yourself casting frequently and wanting to just always have prepared, this will depend a little on your playstyle, so I'll leave it more open and up to you. For our magical secrets here, we get Conjure Elemental. Conjure Elemental is, again, one of the most powerful spells in the game, and because we are a 12th level spellcaster, we do have the 6th level slot to spend on Conjure Elemental. This character can use an item that refreshes your spells in order to cast Conjure Elemental and still have Globe of Invulnerability available. And then for your last spell, again, I highly encourage you to just play around with your last magical secrets selection. There's a lot of really fun options available to this character. Misty Step is always good, especially if you aren't doing illithid powers in this run. It gives you more mobility. Cone of Cold is a pretty good non-concentration damage spell, and having some non-concentration AoE damage, even at high levels, can be pretty nice for this character. So there's a lot of, you could also set them up as a second Spirit Guardians caster to just run around doing even more Spirit Guardians. So there's a lot of different options, and again, I encourage you to play around. I talk a little bit more about the options in the full guide to this character, but here I'm going to go with Cone of Cold, because even more damage is going to be helpful for ending fights quickly, especially because Cone of Cold, as a Constitution save, is going to be hard to resist for mages and squishier enemies. Melee and attacking enemies we don't care about, so blowing up the mages is something that this party is very interested in doing. Finally, we get some more skill expertise, so we can put expertise into religion to make the end game mirror skill checks easier if you want that. You can take acrobatics to become impossible to shove around, or you can just take one of these other skills that makes you better at dialogue, something like insight. That's it for the character. Let's talk about items. Items for this character are very simple. We have one required item, which of course is the Warped Headband of Intellect, which will boost our intelligence up to 17 from the starting 8. This is available very early in Act 1, so you should always be able to get this item, and can prepare and cast your wizard spells with your now 17 intelligence. Other than that, the only things that we care about in items for this character pretty much are increasing our spell save DCs and our initiative. Since we're not taking alert, we need to dedicate at least 1 or 2 pieces of initiative gear to this character. The 2 best ones are the Hellrider Longbow for +3 to initiative passively. It doesn't matter that we're not proficient with longbows, we get the +3 initiative passive anyways, and the Sentinel Shield for another +3. Combined with our base +3, this puts us to +9 initiative, which is more than enough to go first in pretty much every fight in the game, and have a good chance of going first in even the fights against enemies with the highest initiative out there. In addition to our initiative gear, we just want ways to increase our spell save DC. All this character is doing is casting powerful control spells, either ones that we learned from Bard or ones that we scribed as wizard spells. And so we just want our spell save DCs to be as high as possible. For that reason, we'll be using items like the Cloak of the Weave, that gives us a +1 bonus to spell save DC, the Robe of the Weave, which gives us a +1 bonus to spell save DC. With the Robe of the Weave, you will want to use Mage Armor as well, which will give you pretty decent armor class in the end game. We'll have 20 or 21 AC depending on our exact item setup in the end game, which is not incredible, of course, but combined with all of the attack penalties that our party is providing, and the fact that we have Cutting Words and Warding Flare from our ally, as well as shields on ourselves, we should rarely take attacks, even if enemies do somehow get to attack this character, which they usually won't. Before you get the Robe of the Weave, you can use any heavy or medium armor, so the Adamantine Splint or the Dwarven Splint Mail make great options in the first 2 acts. The Dwarven Splint Mail, of course, gives you have heavy armor proficiency from being a light cleric. The Dwarven Splint Mail will give you decent armor class and high constitution, so you won't drop concentration on your saves, which of course this character is always going to be concentrating on spells. For our ring, we're going to go with the Ring of Feywild Sparks. This is not shown in the tooltip, but this does give you a +1 bonus to your spell save DCs. The tooltip here is just missing that kind of important piece of information. So this is going to be the best ring for any spellcaster, and the Amulet of the Devout for another +2 to our spell save DCs. We're also going to be using Markaheshkir in the endgame. This is the best caster weapon in the endgame, and this character is just going to be casting a lot of spells constantly, so Markahesh gear is great. Also, the ability to refresh our spell slots. Of course, you can pass it around between your characters to refresh multiple, but being able to cast both Conjure Elemental and Globe of Invulnerability in the same adventuring day is really important. Other than that, you have a lot of flexibility with the remaining items for this character. I like in the glove slot, the Troubadour gloves are quite good for this character. Extra uses of Cutting Words is great. It just means enemies will fail their saves against your spells more frequently, and you'll be able to use Inspiration and Cutting Words more often. Also, +1 AC is always relevant. For our boots, the boots of Striding are really nice. You're pretty much always going to be concentrating on a spell on this character, and so getting knocked prone is something that you're very concerned about. So the boots of Striding can prevent that from happening and just give you immunity to being knocked prone or displaced. Very helpful. Some other relevant items for this character. Melf's First Staff is what you're probably going to be using up until you get Markahesh gear, +1 to spell save DCs. Starting in Act 1, so it's very helpful for a spellcasting character. The Whispering Promise and the Hellrider's Pride, or later the Reviving Hands, are also a great option if you want the buff on heal items throughout the endgame. This character is a great user for those, and since you don't really have a specific need for a second ring, you can easily slot the Whispering Promise in and just get the occasional buff, even if you're not using healing as your primary strategy. And carrying some healing potions so that when you're concentrating on a spell, you can always spend your action chucking a healing potion at an ally and triggering these buffs. Finally, the Helldust gloves give you +1 to your spell save DCs as well. You're probably, if you have this item, going to want it on the 4th character, but this is a good character to use them as well. And the Elixir of Battle Mage's power increases your spell save DCs again by giving you 3 permanent charges of Arcane Acuity for the entire long rest. So again, is going to make you even better at landing your control spells. With all of these boosts to your save DC, even with only 17 intelligence, it's very rare that enemies are going to pass their saves. Also important on this character is to look out for scrolls. Some very important early ones are Cloud of Daggers, which is going to be your mainstay for your early game combats, and it's also one of the best spells for helping you get the Warped Headband of Intellect, because it doesn't require you to have high intelligence to get uses from Cloud of Daggers. Haste is an easy spell for this character to cast, so a Scroll of Haste is very powerful as well. I like taking Conjure Elemental as a magical secret, because you're always going to want it prepared, and you don't want to use a wizard spell prepared slot on it always. But when you can learn it from a scroll, it's also very good. So this is a very helpful scroll to have. Globe of Invulnerability, one of the most important spells to have in the game, and again, this character provides it. And then keep an eye out for the secret wizard spells as well. Dethrone, Artistry of War, and the Deva Summon, though usually your summons or your high-level spell slots are going to be for Conjure Elementals, for the Myrmidons. But this character, of course, can learn these wizard spells and can make good use of them, most notably Artistry of War, which is just a very, very powerful spell. And finally, for our 4th character, there's a lot of directions you can go to fill out this party. Basically anything that does consistent damage and also applies lockdown that can especially take out enemy spellcasters or dangerous ranged enemies, because melee enemies are so covered by this party. So something like an open hand monk or a shadow monk, a rogue that can get into the back lines, a Gloomstalker ranger, all of these are totally reasonable options. But the character that I've found most effective and synergistic with this party is one that lets us set up our hazardous effects on the ground, lets us get close to enemies, and lets us lock down enemies while also doing incredibly consistent damage every single turn, the Arcane Archer. I think in general, Arcane Archer is heavily underrated in Honor Mode build guides. I think it's one of the strongest characters out there because the level of control it provides while also giving you the amazing damage output of an archer is incredibly strong. So we're going to throw it into this party because it has so much power level and so much synergy with what we're already doing. For our Arcane Archer, we're of course going to start with a level of fighter here. And for our fighting style, we're taking Archery Fighting Style. this obviously lets us hit with our attacks more often, which is exactly what we want. For our ability score selection for this character, I've already got it set up here. We're going to go with 16 in dexterity. Of course, we're an archery-based character, so we want to land our shots. Having high dexterity is necessary. And 16 in intelligence. The arcane archers' save DCs on their abilities are intelligence-based, so you want high intelligence when you're playing this character. We'll also take 14 Constitution and 12 Wisdom. This gives us adequate hit points and a decent saving throw in Wisdom. For our skill selection here, again, we'll pick up Acrobatics, though this character can also take Athletics. You won't be great at it, obviously, because you've got low strength, but not getting shoved around is pretty good. It mostly doesn't matter what you pick, though, so just take anything that you think your party might be missing, and that's it for level 1. At character level 2, of course, we get our second level of fighter, giving us Action Surge for yet more ranged damage. And then at character level 3, we get to take our fighter subclass, which of course we've already said is going to be Arcane Archer. So this gives us the Arcane Arrows, and Arcane Arrows are awesome for a wide variety of reasons, but one of them is you just get so many of them. Compared to Battlemaster fighters, you get way more uses of this ability. And the Arcane Arrows are incredibly strong, so we're going to be able to output enormous numbers of these special arrows, and also the other special arrows that you find throughout the game. We had a cantrip here, and so this doesn't really matter. We already have guidance and light covered from our party members, so we're going to go ahead and take True Strike to yet again annoy people in the YouTube comments. And then for our arcane shots, this is where we have some interesting decisions. Well, the first one, not so much. We're always going to be taking Banishing Arrow. Banishing Arrow is a level 4 spell that we get to cast as an attack, so we can cast it multiple times per turn. It targets the enemy charisma save, so enemies will often fail it, because a lot of enemies have really low charisma saves. And banishing an enemy for 2 turns lets you focus your control on other enemies, lets you kill everything else before they come back, and also lets you set up traps for them. For example, putting Spike Growth and Hunger of Hadar under where a banished enemy is going to return means that when they get back, they're doomed. So this is going to let us set up all of our other control effects, while also, again, doing incredible damage every turn. For our second arrow, we're going to take Shadow Arrow. This will let us blind any enemies that are remaining in the fight, and blind, again, is a very, very powerful debuff. And then for our third arrow, we're either going to take Seeking or Piercing. This is a little bit down to personal preference. Personally, I usually take Seeking because it just always hits, and being able to pick off low health enemies at long range is really good. But if you feel like you need a little more AoE damage, then Piercing Arrow can be very helpful as well. Usually the Dragon Breath and the Radiant Burst from your Cleric will suffice for AoE damage, but Piercing Arrow and Seeking Arrow are both guaranteed sources of damage, so either one can be really good. But here we're going to take Seeking Arrow because it always hits, it can go around corners, so it just gives you even more consistent damage. One thing to know about Seeking Arrow, though, is it doesn't work with Sharpshooter, so it'll be a little bit lower damage than your other arrows, and less than it shows on the tooltip, irritatingly. So you just have to be aware of that when you're casting this ability. At character level 4, we get our first feat, of course, and the feat that we're going to take is, of course, going to be Sharpshooter. Just like every archer before us, we want to get our high damage online as quickly as possible, and Sharpshooter is enough damage output that even with the relatively low damage rest of the party, which are mostly focused on control and not on pure damage output, this party will be more than capable of killing enemies quickly if you want them dead quickly. This also makes this the perfect character for taking out squishy mages, especially, which, since we're so good against melee characters, we're so indexed into destroying enemy melee characters entirely, being able to knock out mages is the only thing we're missing from the party, so it's one of the reasons why I really like the Arcane Archer as an addition to the party here. At character level 5, we get extra attack, which not only lets us attack multiple times per turn for more damage, it also lets us use multiple arcane arrows in a turn for even more control. So it's even better for this character than for other martial characters. And then at fighter level 6, we get an additional feat, and the feat that we're going to go with here is an ability score improvement to bump up our dexterity. Obviously, we want to hit with our attack, so increasing our dexterity as much as possible is exactly what we want. You can take alert at this point as well if you find that you're losing initiative, but with a dexterity-based character, the +4 to initiative at this point should be plenty. Most enemies don't get alert until later acts, so just boosting your chance to hit is going to be the most important thing at this point. Especially because we have Sharpshooter, so we want to hit with our attacks to land our extra Sharpshooter damage, even with the penalty. At fighter level 7, we get magic, arrow, and curving shot, so we're going to be able to attack even if we miss, which is awesome. And we get additional uses of arcane arrow. We also get to learn another arcane shot. There's, again, any of the 5 arcane arrows here I think can be pretty good options. But what I'm going to suggest is that you take the enfeebling arrow. Being able to make enemies feeble means that even if by some chance an enemy does land an attack, it'll only do half damage. So again, enemies will just not be able to perform meaningful actions against you. But again, this is kind of up to personal preference. I think that all of the arcane arrows are good and quite well balanced. Honestly, this class is kind of a triumph of design in that way, and that all of the options are interesting and good. So you can really play around with this, and also feel free to swap out your arrows as you level up in order to experiment with different ones. At character level 8, we are going to get another feat, and of course we're going to simply increase our dexterity up to 20 here. Again, just making ourselves as consistent as possible. This character is here to bring just solid consistency to the party, so this is exactly what we want to make sure that it's doing. We get to fulfill that theme even further when we take Indomitable here, so again, we're even better at saving throws when we're able to re-roll them, and if we do happen to fail a save, it's usually going to be against something that we can be snapped out of with freedom of movement or restoration from one of our party members. At character level 10, we get to choose yet another arcane shot. And again, here there are any of the 4 options can be pretty good. At this point, though, there's a decent chance that we're going to be playing close up to enemies in melee, doing piercing damage using the ballast armor, in which case piercing arrow is going to be very, very strong. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the item section as well. So if you're using the ballast armor for this, you definitely want piercing arrow to be able to just blow up a whole group of enemies with the piercing damage from that. But again, any of the possible options here are very good, and being able to deal a little bit more damage with Grasping Arrow, or deal AoE damage at range with Bursting Arrow are still very nice options as well. Then at fighter level 11, we don't have any particular decisions to make, but we do get improved extra attack, which again, not only lets us just do more damage, increasing our damage on a typical turn by 50%. It also lets us cast multiple arcane arrows in a turn yet again, or special arrows that we have in our inventory. So we can banish 3 enemies, blind 3 enemies, or even more than that if we want to use Action Surge in a given round. And then finally, at character level 12, we get our last feat. There's a lot of options here, but usually you're going to want to take Alert. This just guarantees that we go before every enemy, even in the end game. So +10 to initiative means that the lowest initiative in this party is +8. So we'll always go before pretty much every enemy in the game, even the fastest ones out there. Some other options that you can take if you, for whatever reason, don't want to take Alert. You can just boost your intelligence to make the save DCs on your arrows better, though we'll have ways to do that with our items as well. You can take mobile, being able to move faster, of course, is always relevant to an archer. Lucky can make you even more consistent, so there's a few other options that can be pretty good for this character. Usually, though, Alert is just going to be the best one. That's it for the build, though. Let's get on to items. And finally, for items for this character, your items can once again be pretty open depending on your route through the game and exactly your preference in terms of itemizing. So this is another spot in this party where you get to play around and take items that you think are fun or interesting, or that you just haven't tried yet. There are, of course, some items that we're definitely going to want. Obviously, we need a good bow in order to play an arcane archer. In the early game, you basically have 2 options. You can either use an Elixir of Hill Giant Strength alongside the Titan String bow. This is the highest damage option and will stay the highest damage option throughout the game. But this character doesn't really need the additional damage from the Titan String Bow. Your damage is honestly plenty high already, and what you're really concerned about is consistency. Another option in the early game is the Bow of the Banshee. Being able to inflict Frightened is yet more control that you get basically for free, and it will happen constantly. You'll also be constantly getting the bonus to your hit chance, which again is going to let you use Sharpshooter even more frequently. In the later game, the Deadshot is usually going to be the best. This increases your damage by improving your critical hit chance, and also, of course, gives you a +4 bonus to your chance to hit enemies by doubling your proficiency bonus, so means that you basically never miss with this +2 longbow, so the Deadshot's usually what I'm going to go with in the end game. If you find that you're hitting all your attacks anyways, this character can also use Gaunter Mail pretty well. The Deadshot is usually going to be better, but this is one of the builds where, because your hit chances are usually good and you mostly care about the secondary effects, Gaunter Mail's bonuses are pretty nice, and Guiding Bolt, the Guiding Bolt effect giving you advantage on your attacks against the target, plus all of your sources of blind and everything mean that you can hit these attacks, and you can use the cool legendary weapon here. In addition to that, so most likely you're going to go with the Deadshot, but there's some room for experimentation. In addition to that, you are highly incentivized to use one of the coolest item combinations in the game, the Snowburst Ring plus the Drakethroat Glaive. This is going to let you enchant your bow with cold damage using the Great Drakethroat Glaive's Draconic Elemental Weapon. So you enchant your bow with a cold damage boost, and then every time you deal cold damage, you create an ice surface under the enemies that you shoot with the Snowburst Ring. You can make this even more devastating with the Winter's Clutches, inflicting Encrusted with Frost, which will give enemies disadvantage on the dexterity saving throws, so you can add on to this combo. It's not necessary. Enemies will fall over on the ice surfaces from the Snowburst Ring very consistently, because they're based on your character's spell save DC, which is going to be based on your relatively high intelligence, and which will be boosting in other ways. So this combo lets you set up even more control and just free control surfaces every time you fire your weapon. The other ways to boost your spell save DC for this character is the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. Arcane Acuity does work on Arcane Archer shots, so you're going to be increasing your spell save DC for every one of your Arcane Archer debuffs, so enemies will rarely fail the save. This is obviously incredibly powerful, but one thing that's kind of fun about Arcane Archers is that you get to use Arcane Acuity in a more fair way, certainly not in a fair way, because this effect is just so busted no matter how you use it. But it is a little more fair than on spells that become irresistible, and is kind of cool that it's used on a character that it feels much more thematic for. If you really don't like the Arcane Acuity helmet, then some other cool options are the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. We're going to be inflicting conditions constantly, and so this just lets us increase our weapon damage by our spellcasting modifier, which is +3, so we'll just add +3 to all of our damage with Arcane Synergy. And of course the Marksmanship Hat is going to be the best in slot in the early game and remains relevant throughout the game. +1 to ranged attack rolls is just always good, so you could even wear this on into the end game, especially if you just like the high fashion that it provides. For your armor, this character is going to use basically whichever uncapped medium armor you aren't using on your frontliner. So the Armor of Agility is going to go on the frontliner. This character is probably going to end up in the Yuan-Ti Scale Mail, but there's a couple other cool options for armors. In the early game, up until you have 20 dexterity, the Graceful Cloth is always going to be great. It's excellent on any sharpshooter build, increasing your chance to hit, of course, so your sharpshooter damage increases even more. And it also lets you play from stealth more, so you can play as a stealth archer and have the low AC that the Graceful Cloth will give you not really matter. In the end game, the Ballast Armor can go on either this character or on your Glaivemaster character. Typically, I like it on this character, but there are a lot of people who don't like managing the spacing for archers, so you can put it on the melee character instead. And obviously, this doubles all the piercing damage that you're doing, so if you're finding that you don't do enough damage, this will completely solve any damage problems that the character has. Another couple items that are cool for this character, the Risky Ring, of course, means that you're going to hit your shots even more frequently, always good. The Caustic Band is just some extra damage on every single attack, so is always going to, again, boost your damage output. For your gloves, the Helldusk gloves are also a great option for this character, giving you +1 bonus to your spell save DC, which works on your Arcane Archer abilities, and increasing the damage of all of your attacks. So, obviously very good. The Disintegrating Nightwalkers make excellent boots. You don't have Misty Step by default, so this gives you a little bit more mobility. And in your melee weapon slot, the Knife of the Undermountain King and the Bloodthirst Dagger, again, ignore the title, it's an artifact of spawning in the weapon here, increase your critical hit chance. This combined with the dead shot means that you'll critically hit on a 16 or higher, or a 17 or higher, so you're going to be critically hitting constantly when you have all of these weapons equipped, or all of these items equipped, and that will, again, increase your damage even further, multiplying the damage of your Arcane Archer shots. Finally, even though you can't use them in the same action as an Arcane Archer, as an Arcane Arrow, the special arrows that available in the game, like the Slaying Arrows, and of course the Many Targets arrows, and anything like the Arrow of Ice for early ice surfaces, give you yet more options, and give you a lot of cool things that you could do in combat, in addition to choosing between your arcane arrows. So this character, again, is very flexible in how you build it. There's some items that are very powerful, but overall, you get a lot of optionality. Outside of your bow and the Snowburst Ring Drakethroat Glaive combo, and the Helmet of Arcane Acuity, if you want to be as powerful as possible, you can pretty much do anything with this character, so have fun with it. Alright, my friends, I hope that you've enjoyed this look at one of the most powerful control-based parties in Baldur's Gate 3, and I hope you enjoy locking down your enemies to the point where they can't fight back. As always, of course, if you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to hit like and leave a comment. Obviously, those things help me out with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I also want to apologize for not having posted as much Baldur's Gate 3 stuff lately. I've been hitting Slay the Spire 2 really hard, so go check out those Slay the Spire videos if you haven't seen them. I've really been enjoying the game, and you might enjoy seeing me play it as well. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 videos and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.